What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the first person shooter tutorial series, we're going to be going over screen and camera shake in our game. And so when we shoot our weapon, or when we take damage, I want to add a little bit of screen or camera shake. Now in this case, it's pretty subtle, but you can see that when I take damage, my weapon goes kind of far to the side. Really, it's not my weapon going far to the side, it is the camera adding a little bit of shake. You can make this as dramatic or as subtle as you want, but I have it when firing as well. You can see the gun seems to pull down and to the left a little bit. That is just my personal version of the shake. So we have linear shakes where it always does the same thing every time like this, and we have random shakes where the shake can go in different directions at different intensities. Camera shake is also very good for sprinting because right now I'm sprinting and there's no shake. So while it is very easy to see what's going on, it's not very realistic. And so if you want to add camera shake for sprinting, this tutorial will help you do that as well. Although I actually am going to have a separate tutorial for camera shake when sprinting because that logic can get really intense. We can do a lot with it, more than just the shake, but we can actually make it blurry and seem like we're moving really fast and that sort of thing too. So I'm going to have a little bit more going on with that logic than I have here. But you can feel free to use this for whatever circumstances you see fit. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support, for continuing to keep these series alive and give me great ideas to work on and that you're interested in seeing. And before we get started on this episode, if you want to get caught up in the series and see how we've implemented everything to this point, from the animations, the firing logic, the different weapons and interaction system, feel free to click this playlist right here in the top right corner and check all of that out. But if you just care about the screen shake, I would recommend you watch this episode right here, which is where we initially set up the HUD, which is going to make a lot of things like the screen shake a lot simpler to visualize and see. With all that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial, so I'm going to go over how to make a camera shake effect in code, as well as make a camera shake effect in the blueprint. We're going to start with the blueprint, and to do that, we can go to where we want to create our blueprints, and I've made a new folder called Effects, and I'm going to put my camera shake effects that I make in blueprint in here. Go to Add, and go to Blueprints, Blueprint Class, or select the Blueprint class right here, and search in your all classes for camera shake. Now, if you're in Unreal Engine 4, it'll just say camera shake. This will be the exact name of the class. If you're in Unreal Engine 5, like myself, then you'll want to use the MatineeCameraShake. MatineeCameraShake, as it says in this comment here, is the legacy camera shake, which can do either oscillation or run camera anims. So this is actually the camera shake from Unreal Engine 4. So you don't want the camera shake base or the default camera shake base for this method. You can of course use these for camera shake, as that's what they're intended for, but I've intentionally picked this class to take advantage of it for this type of camera shake. Once you select it, you'll get a class, and I called mine base fire shake. So I'm going to delete the new one I made. And I've called it base fire shake because sometimes when you're firing, you know how I have this little jitter that I show you where the camera kind of shakes and the gun always points this direction. It's different from recoil, it's different from flinching, it's just a little camera effect here. If you're firing something heavy like a cannon, you'll most likely want more shake during that fire or during that shooting. And so in this case, this is my basic or generic camera shake, and that's why it's my base. And fire just stands for firing the weapon, so base fire shake. Now, when you come in here, you won't have any graphs or anything like that. What you'll actually just have is some variables. You can open the full blueprint editor and see a graph, but we don't really have to do anything with this. All we care about are these variables in the details panel. So if you don't have this details panel open by default, make sure you click the class defaults button in the blueprint and you'll get this option here. All of the things with the little arrow next to them are fields that I have changed in one way or another. But I'm going to go ahead and explain what pretty much all of these things do. So your oscillation duration is the duration of the shake. As it says here, less than 0 means indefinite and 0 means no oscillation. If I am to put 50 in this duration, When I shoot my gun, you're going to see a lot of shake. It's really slow, but this is what it looks like. It's going to go for 50 seconds. That time is in seconds. So I had it as 0.2 because I just wanted it to be like a quick little flicker just for the purposes of this episode. But you can make that duration whatever you'd like and change it, of course, to fit your needs. Now, the blend-in time and the blend-out time go hand in hand. So basically, the blend-in time is changing from your regular camera to the shake location of the camera, and same with the blend-out time. So if you move these to be 0, as an example, it's going to show the whole shake to you. It's not going to have any blend. You're going to start there immediately. The same with blend during an animation blueprint. So if you're familiar with that, how you can blend animations, it's going to do that same process. And of course, same with the blend out. It's going to snap a lot as compared to just actually blend together. So I kept these default values. I did not touch the rotation oscillation. I did location oscillation. But just so you're aware, this term oscillation, in this case, really it just means the movement that we're going to apply to the camera. I'll go over some rotation oscillation after we do the location oscillation, just so you can see an example of it. So location oscillation is actual movement of the camera to get that shake. And I've done movement on the Y and the Z axes. You can always go to your level and look at this little graph here of your X, Y, and Z. This is what your values in the location oscillation are going to go off of. So if I have X camera shake, say I put some random values in here that I will go over in a second what they actually mean, you're going to see when I have that camera shake, it zooms in because X is depth. And so if we were wanting to add depth or zoom out, we could edit the X location oscillation, but we don't need to do that. I've decided not to do that. So I've left the X alone and I've modified the Y and the Z. Y is your horizontal location and Z is your vertical location. So if you open up your Y and your Z, you can change the amplitude, frequency, initial offset, and waveform. The amplitude is how much there is going to be. Just like on a graph, amplitude is the highest value. That's really what this represents as well. This value starts out as 0 when you come in, and the higher you make this value, the more shake there's going to be. So if I had an amplitude of 500, then there's going to be a lot of horizontal movement when I fire my weapon. I've decided 15 is a good value for me, but, you know, it is very subtle. We could maybe change it to 30. Doesn't really look good for firing a weapon, but you can see exactly what it is that is happening here. The frequency is the rate at which it is going to go through this. And so again, starting at 0, the higher you make this value, the faster it is going to go through it. But we have a duration, so it's going to repeat for that duration. So if the frequency is 500, it's really fast. You're going to see that it's going to kind of loop through itself. See that? It's bouncing back and forth because it was able to complete the entire shake using this frequency, but the duration is still going to let the shake happen for 0.5 seconds. So it's going to bounce back and forth. So if you don't want that bouncing back and forth effect, you'll want to keep this frequency lower. My frequency that I had before of 1.0 was pretty slow, so maybe we'll move it up to a 2, and you get that effect. I think I'm going to make it move the other way as well. I can make the amplitude negative, which will make it the opposite direction. There you go, something like that. Again, for me, it doesn't have to look great. This is just for the tutorial purposes, but you can customize this a lot to make it look like what you'd expect. The initial offset is where you want it to begin. So the comment says it here. You can either start it at 0, or you can randomize the value. For an effect that you want to always be consistent, you'll want to have that value as 0. So like this is always consistent. It always is going to play the same camera shake. Now the damage one is not consistent. You can see the shake starts at different spots. You can see it's always different. That's because the damage one is random, but this firing one I've kept as 0 for both my Y and my Z. That way it's always consistent. The waveform is the type of wave, so sine wave or Perlin noise. Now, when you actually go and play this, you'll notice the Perlin noise is a little bit more groovy with it. It's a little bit more circular. It doesn't really stay as linear as the sine wave. If you do the sine wave, it's really cut and dry, like, oh, we're going to go straight down to the left, like diagonal. And you can do this for the Z as well, and notice it there. It's a little bit, it's like going in a circle. So that's up to you. You can make that whatever you want, of course. I think I actually kind of like the purling noise now that I'm using it here. And so I'm going to keep it like that. So these are my values for my Y. These are my values for my Z. They're pretty similar. These are the values that I've chosen. You can customize it as much as you want. You can also do field of view oscillation, which is kind of similar to using the X location, but it is slightly different. So if you wanted to have a field of view, you could put in an amplitude of 500. Let's put a frequency of 1. And let's do that, and you'll see the field of view will actually change, right? It's like a zoom, really big zoom. If the field of view goes negative, it does actually inverse, which is why you saw it go kind of upside down there. So that one's a little crazy. Amplitude's a little high, but you could, of course, tone this down and do something like that. So you get kind of a zoom effect. I didn't need to mess with the field of view oscillation, so I'm going to revert all that back to default. And just to show you guys a rotation oscillation while we're here, this does what you can imagine. It will rotate the shake. So let me give it a frequency. So when I do this, it will actually add some rotation, which can look good. It looks really good for damage. Do it just like this. Looks like maybe I'm taking hits, but probably don't need it in this specific case. Use it if you want it. Now, once you have this set up, it's very simple to use. There is a system in Unreal that will allow us to play it right away. So since I've done this first camera shake in Blueprints, let's also call it in Blueprints. So I'm going to go to my FP weapon, weapons, base weapon BP, and this is my initial weapon that I have. That is my little blaster. And it is my parent class for my other weapons, so I would recommend going to this blueprint, your parent weapon class. And in the fire weapon event is where I want to play the camera shake, so I've gone to my event fire weapon. I have two different types, one for projectile, one for hit scan. I want to do the camera shake for both of them, but you may want to do some separate logic depending on what they are. Like if it's hit scan, you might want to do less shake than if it's projectile. For me, it's actually the exact same, so I have it in both places at the very end of each path, projectile and hit scan. So for the projectile, after spawning the projectile at the crosshairs, whether we're zoomed in or not, I then go into my logic, and for the hit scan, when we create the ray trace from the blind fire or the zoom in, we start the camera shake. Now this function, start camera shake, is actually an Unreal function. It's not one that we made, and it belongs to the player camera manager. Now whether we set one up or not, the player camera manager does exist, and you can always get this by just typing get player camera manager. You can use player index 0 because right now we're just worried about our first character, and the return value is the player camera manager for that object. If you drag off of it and type start camera shake, you get the function that you see here. And from here, it's super simple. We just plug in the values we want. So the shake class is going to be our base fire shake. For the scale, I left it as 1. You can actually modify this. So if you want it to be 3 times the scale of the shake that we created, you could do that. The play spaces, if you want relative or world, if you're familiar with, set relative location, set world location, that sort of thing, this goes off of the same idea. I'm going to use camera local because I want it to just be applied to the camera that we are referring to, and make sure what that player is seeing through that camera is what's affected by the shake. So camera local as the default is perfectly fine. And user play space rotation I leave alone. It's a rotator you can pass in, so you could give it a value like 50, and it will work off of that coordinate system. But we are having everything local anyway, and the shake does not use that value. So I'm going to keep it at 0. Makes no difference. And I have the same for the other shake here. Again, these are the same shake. I have it called in 2 places, projectile and hit scan. You could mix them together, but at this point, in case you want to separate them, I've just written it out both times. Now, with this done, I want to show you how to do the damage shake, but we're going to do it in code. We're going to do the entire process in code this time. First thing we need to do is create the C++ class for the MatineeCameraShake. So to do this, you can go to your C++ classes folder in Unreal Engine 4 or 5 and create a new C++ class. If you're in Unreal Engine 4, you can also do this by hitting Add and going up to the top. There'll be a new C++ class. Either one of those options will work. But one way or another, create a new C++ class, go to All Classes, search for your camera shake again, and you're going to want the same one that we made the blueprint out of, which is the MatineeCameraShake. Right here. Hit Next, and name it. I called this one Base Damage Shake. And hit Create Class. Once you do that, it will create the class for you in Visual Studio. You might have to close your editor to get it to open up, but once you have this here in your folders under source and the name of your project, you'll have all your classes. You should now see your new camera shake that you created, which is, for me, is the basedamageshake.h and basedamageshake.cpp. Let's now go to those files. So I'm going to go to my basedamageshake.h. Everything I have in this file is exactly the same as how it was when it was created, except for these two lines right here. So yours should look very similar to mine. What you're going to want to add is a default constructor to this so that we can set the default variables. So just like in the blueprint where we set all the variables for the amplitude, the frequency, and the location oscillation, we want to do the same thing here, but we're going to do it in code. And so instead of setting it in a class default section, we're going to set it in the constructor. You don't have to make this public, but my other constructors were public. So I went ahead and wrote public here just to kind of make that fit with the other ones. For example, if I go to my FPS tutorial character, you see the constructor is clearly under the public tab. So just to be consistent, I did that. And this just means that we can see it in other classes. It doesn't have to be a child of this class or itself. Then the default constructor works the same as any other constructor. You just write the name of the class with parentheses and a semicolon. So basedamageshake. When I go into my basedamageshake.cpp, you're going to have only these two lines in here. So we're going to write this entire constructor. So first of all, set it up. Make sure the constructor exists. And then we'll fill out all the logic individually. I've kind of outlined the exact setup that I have here, but we're going to probably play around with it and test out a few things while we're in here. So the first thing I've set up is the oscillation duration. This is the same duration as the base fire shake. So we're just basically pulling the variables that we were setting in class defaults, but setting them in the constructor in the code. So oscillation duration is the length of the damage camera shake effect in seconds. And I put this one to half a second as well, just like we have the base fire shake. I did not edit the blend time or the blend in or the blend out time. And so both of these are going to have their default values, which are 0.1 and 0.2. You could feel free to write them out if you wanted to. To do so, you would type oscillation, blend in time, and set them. Oscillation, blend out time, and set it. But it's not required that you do that because they are going to default. If you wanted to change them though, here's how you could do it. Then I went ahead and selected location oscillation for this one as well, for the damage, just like I did for the fire. And to grab the location oscillation, use lock oscillation. And then you also are going to want to use the axis that you want. So I skipped X on this one as well. So I'm starting with Y. I set the amplitude to 15. I set the frequency to 1.0. I set the initial offset to this enum value. This is not one we created. This is what the E initial oscillator offset enum reads from. So you either have EOO offset 0 or EOO offset random. EOO max is not actually one that you can select in the blueprint. It is just the max value of that enum. It's not really meant to be selected. It is more as a check that you can use. Sometimes you can set a maximum value in an enum to check in things like for loops or if statements. So that's really what that's for. So don't use that one. Use either offset 0 or offset random. I used offset random for the damage. I thought that looked better. And the waveform, I used sine wave. Might be interesting to try out the purlin noise for this. That I actually did not test, so maybe that'll look pretty good if we do that. Now, I did the same thing for the z-axis. I copied and pasted, and I realized I made a mistake. So you're going to use lock oscillation.z instead of .y. So make sure you replace it everywhere. Instead of using .y, use .z. So fix up that little mistake. But otherwise, everything is the same. I mean, feel free to change these values. That is entirely up to you. But really, nothing has to be different here. This is all personal preference. So once you get one down, you can easily do the others. If you wanted to add a little bit of rotational movement as well, we could do some of that. We could do the rotation, oscillation, we'll say movement, on the, let's do X. Let's do the pitch. Let's do the pitch, actually. On the pitch of the damage camera shake effect. And to do that, we can use rot oscillation dot pitch dot amplitude, and we can give it a value. Let's give it a value of 25. And now we can do rot oscillation dot pitch dot frequency equals 5. Rot oscillation dot pitch dot initial offset equals E initial oscillator offset colon E00. Let's do offset random. Make sure it is random, just like our location one. And we'll do rot oscillation dot pitch dot waveform, and we're going to use the E oscillator waveform enum colon, and we'll get this one a purlin noise because why not? And so there you go. You can modify this as much as you want. I'm not going to go over every single one. Now we need to make sure once we have our camera shake effect in place that we actually call the start camera shake functions just like we did in the blueprint. I'm going to do that in my character specifically when we take damage. So if we go to our FPS tutorial character.cpp, we need to make sure that we include the base damage shake class. That way we can actually access it, because we do need to know what class we're referencing when passing it in to the start camera shake function. So at the very bottom of my include list here, I have include base damage shake.h. Now once I've done that, I can go down to where I want to play my effect, which is in the take damage function. So scroll down to take damage. So here is my take damage function, and I have a lot of logic in here. I pretty much want to play the camera shake at any point. The only thing that I do check for is if we are not already dead before applying damage, and I did decide to add the camera shake effect in there, because if we're already dead, we don't need to have the camera keep shaking when we take damage, but of course you can leave it if you want. So really anywhere in here, for me it's just within the first if statement, if not dead, and we call this function here. This is all we have to do. So we use uGameplayStatics : get player camera manager. That's the function that we're calling. It is a static function from the uGameplayStatics class. Now, quickly going back up to the includes, I have already included this because I've used the GameplayStatics file before in my FPS tutorial character, but if you are following this either out of order or you're not watching every episode, make sure that you have this include so that you can call the function. So that is include kismet/gameplaystatics.h. Now going back down to take damage, the parameter list goes as follows. You need your world context object and your player index. So we need to get the world, that is our context, and we need to pass in the index of this character, really. But right now, since we're only dealing with one, passing in 0 is fair to do. So we want to get the player camera manager for this world at index 0, and that is our get player camera manager. Once we do that, we can use the arrow operator to call a function on the player camera manager, and we want to call the start camera shake function. Now, like the blueprint function, there is a lot that you can add to the start camera shake function, but I'm going to leave all of it as default, just like we did in the blueprint function. The only thing I need to pass it is the class that we want to use for the shake. You can see it's the first parameter here, T subclass of shake class. And we don't have to pass it a specific reference, a specific object, we just have to know what class we're referencing. So we can use U base damage shake, : static class, parentheses. And this line right here will get a player camera manager and call the start camera shake using our base damage shake that we just set up. I'm going to relaunch, and when we get back, I will catch up with you. Alright, the editor is back open, so now we're going to come in here, and we're going to take damage. And when we do that, you'll see that the effect is all over the place now. We have rotation going on, we changed some of our amplitudes and frequencies, so it's a lot more dramatic now than it was before. But it does kind of look like a damage effect. I could see it. So anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video and it helped you make your camera shakes, then please subscribe. It does a lot for me in the channel, and it's completely free to do. If you would like to send some thanks my way, or just feel like supporting the channel, feel free to reach out to me and join the Patreon tiers that I have, the YouTube membership tiers, or just send thanks with super thanks. It's all appreciated, and it really helps keep these series alive, so thank you so much for all the love and support. Again, mega thank you to everyone who has already done this. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for everything. If you guys had any issues implementing the camera shakes in your game and would like some assistance, there's a free Discord community you can join. There's a link in the description. I'll be happy to help you out. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you, so thank you so much for watching. I am Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.